"Save my child, and I will reward you with myself," the Apache widow said to a retired rancher. Henry McAllister had lived on the edge of the Arizona desert for nearly 20 years since retiring from the busy life of ranching. The wide-open plains stretched endlessly beyond his small homestead, with dry grasses swaying in the wind, and distant mesas rising like silent guardians over the horizon. The only sounds he usually heard were the low calls of hawks, the occasional bark of a coyote, and the rhythmic creaking of his old wooden windmill. Life had slowed down for him. The hectic days of managing hundreds of cattle and chasing rustlers had faded into memory, replaced with quiet routines and the occasional solitude that came with living alone. Henry's house was small but sturdy, built from weathered wood and stone that seemed to grow out of the land itself. Its roof sagged in places, and the paint had faded under the harsh desert sun. But to Henry, it was perfect. Inside, the fireplace was always ready with a crackling fire, and the shelves were lined with books he had collected over decades. Some were about ranching, others about the history of the West, and a few were novels he had found at second-hand stores. He liked the quiet company of books. They were predictable, and they never asked for anything in return. Most days, Henry rose at dawn. He would check on his small herd of cows, repair broken fences, or ride out on horseback to inspect the far edges of his property. He often thought about how different his life had become from what it once was. He remembered mornings when the sun barely touched the horizon and he would be racing across miles of open land, trying to round up lost calves or chase away rustlers. Back then, his heart had always raced with excitement. But now, there was a calm that came with age. The days were slower, the work less intense, and the nights peaceful. Evenings were the time Henry treasured most. He would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun turn the sky into a canvas of pink, orange, and gold. Sometimes he would talk quietly to himself, or murmur stories from his past to the wind, though no one was there to listen. He liked the company of memories, especially those that reminded him of his youth. His late wife had passed many years ago, leaving him with a quiet home and only the echoes of her laughter in the rooms. Their children had grown up and moved to cities far away, chasing lives Henry could only watch from a distance. Henry's life was one of routine and solitude, and he was content in his own way. The desert had a rhythm that suited him, slow and steady, with a sense of permanence that felt comforting. He knew every rock, every curve of the land, and every hidden trail that led through the canyons. He could find water in the driest months, track an animal by the marks it left on the ground, and sense the coming of storms long before the sky darkened. The land had taught him patience, resilience, and respect, and in return he had given it his care and devotion. But one evening, as the sky turned the deep colors of twilight, a change came to Henry's quiet world. He had just settled into his chair by the fireplace, a book open on his lap, when he heard the faint sound of footsteps crunching over the dry grass outside. At first he thought it might be a coyote or some wandering animal, but the sound grew steadier, heavier, more deliberate. Henry set the book aside and stood, listening intently. The footsteps stopped near the edge of his porch, and a voice called out, "Soft but urgent. Please, I need your help," the voice said. Henry opened the door slowly. Standing there was a woman unlike any he had seen before. Her skin was a warm golden brown, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. Her eyes were wide with fear and worry, and her clothes, simple and worn, marked her as someone who had traveled a long distance on foot. She held the hand of a small boy, no more than 8 or 9 years old, who clung to her side, his eyes wide and nervous.
"My name is Naya," the woman said, her voice trembling. "Please, you must help me."
"My son, he has been taken." Henry felt a cold knot of unease tighten in his chest. He had seen many things in his life, but there was something different about the fear in her voice, something that demanded immediate attention. He stepped aside, gesturing for them to come in. "Come inside," he said quietly. "Tell me what happened." Naya's eyes filled with tears as she entered the house, brushing the dust from her clothes. She carried herself with a quiet dignity, despite the desperation in her expression. She knelt beside the fire, holding her son close, and began to speak. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but each word carried the weight of urgency and sorrow. "My son. He was taken by a group of bandits. They want money, a ransom. I have no one else to turn to. The authorities are too slow, and I cannot risk waiting. Please, you must help me." Henry listened, his mind racing. He had faced danger in his youth, but he was old now, and the thought of confronting criminals again made his chest tighten. Yet, when he looked at the boy's frightened face, something inside him stirred. A protective instinct, he thought, had long been buried. Naya continued, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "I know this is unusual, and I know it may seem strange, but I will reward you if you save him. I will reward you with myself." Henry blinked, taken aback. The words were bold, startling, and complicated. He was a man who had lived alone for years, used to his routines and the quiet life he had built, yet the fear in her eyes, the urgency of her plea, and the innocence of the boy moved him. He took a deep breath and tried to steady his thoughts.
"You don't understand," he said carefully. "I'm not a young man anymore."
"I faced trouble before, but this is dangerous. I don't even know if I can help." Naya nodded, her expression a mixture of gratitude and desperation. "I know you're a man of courage, Henry McAllister. I know you can help him. I can see it in your eyes." Henry felt a strange mix of fear, responsibility, and curiosity. He had lived a long life, and he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about Naya's plea, about the way she carried herself, and about the boy's trembling hand in hers told him that this was not a false call for help. It was real, urgent, and it needed him. After a long pause, Henry finally spoke. "All right," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll do what I can. Tell me everything you know about where they took him, who they are, and what they want." Relief washed over Naya's face, but it was mixed with the lingering fear that time was against them. She told Henry about the bandits, their hideout deep in the canyons, and the threats they had made. She spoke of the boy's innocence, the limited time they had, and the harsh desert terrain that would make any rescue mission difficult. Henry listened carefully, his mind already forming a plan. He knew the land better than anyone else. He knew the canyons, the trails, and the hidden paths. He knew how to track animals and people alike. And although he was older, he was still capable, still strong, and still wise from a lifetime of experience. As the night deepened, Henry sat by the fire, thinking of what lay ahead. He knew the journey would be dangerous. He knew he could fail. But he also knew that some things were worth the risk. Protecting a child, helping a mother, standing up to danger, these were things that mattered more than comfort, more than routine, more than a quiet life. By the time the fire had burned low, Henry had made up his mind. He would help Naya and her son. He would face whatever dangers awaited in the canyons, relying on his skill, his experience, and his courage. And though he did not know what the future held, he felt a spark of purpose that had lain dormant for many years. For the first time in a long while, Henry McAllister felt alive. Henry McAllister spent the next morning preparing for the journey that would take him deep into the unforgiving desert canyons. The early sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and orange, but Henry hardly noticed. His mind was occupied with plans and contingencies, and a quiet determination settled over him. He had faced many challenges in his life, but rescuing a child from bandits was different. It was personal, urgent, and dangerous. He first checked his horse, a sturdy gray mare named Willow, who had been with him for years. Her coat gleamed in the sunlight, and her dark eyes watched him with quiet intelligence. Henry ran his hands over her neck, feeling the strength beneath the skin, and whispered encouragements. Willow had been through rough terrain, long rides, and harsh winters. She would carry him safely if he treated her carefully and listened to her instincts. Next, Henry packed his supplies. He brought water for both himself and the boy, dried meat and bread for sustenance, a rope, a hunting knife, a blanket, and a small pouch of medicinal herbs. He checked his revolver carefully, not to use it aggressively, but for safety in case of unexpected danger. He packed light, knowing speed and endurance would be essential. Every item had a purpose. There was no room for unnecessary weight. As he worked, Naya and her son watched from the porch, their eyes filled with hope and fear. The boy, little Aki, clung to his mother's side, still trembling from the thought of what had happened. Henry knelt down beside him. "You're brave," he said softly. "We'll find your father. We'll find you safely. Don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you." Aki nodded shyly, gripping Henry's hand. There was a flicker of trust there, fragile but real. Henry felt a warmth in his chest, a reminder of the family he had once had and the protective instincts he had always carried. He stood, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Today, the quiet life he had built would give way to action, courage, and perhaps danger. But he was ready. The journey began at dawn. The desert stretched before him, wide and open, with long shadows cast by mesas and cliffs. Henry guided Willow along a narrow trail, the dry earth crunching beneath the horse's hooves. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Birds soared overhead, their calls echoing across the canyons. The landscape was beautiful but harsh, reminding Henry that nature could be both a friend and an enemy. As he rode, Henry thought carefully about the information Naya had shared. The bandits had taken Aki to a hidden camp in a canyon, far from any town or road. They were known to be cruel, opportunistic, and secretive. Henry had no idea how many there were or what weapons they carried. He would have to rely on stealth, strategy, and his knowledge of the land. Every decision mattered. One wrong step could end the rescue before it began. He paused at a small rise overlooking a dry riverbed. The canyon ahead twisted and turned, forming shadows that hid many possibilities. Henry dismounted, letting Willow graze on the sparse grasses while he studied the terrain. He could see where the bandits might have made trails, where rocks could provide cover, and where he could approach without being seen. His years on the ranch and in the wild had taught him to observe carefully, think ahead, and act with patience. The morning passed slowly as he moved through the canyon, avoiding obvious paths and keeping low whenever he thought someone might be watching. He noticed small signs of passage, broken branches, footprints in the dust, a flicker of smoke in the distance. These clues confirmed he was heading in the right direction, but also reminded him that the bandits were aware and alert. He had to be clever, patient, and careful. As the sun climbed higher, the heat began to take its toll. Henry paused to drink water and rest Willow. He shaded his eyes and scanned the cliffs for signs of danger. He thought about Aki and Naya, imagining the fear the boy must feel and the worry that weighed heavily on the mother. That thought strengthened his resolve. This was not just a mission. It was a promise, a duty, and a moral obligation. In the afternoon, Henry encountered his first obstacle, a narrow passage between two towering cliffs, filled with loose rocks. The sound of footsteps here would carry easily, alerting anyone below. He led Willow carefully, testing each step before moving, and guided her with quiet murmurs. The horse responded well, and they passed through without incident. Henry felt a surge of relief, but he knew more challenges awaited. By late afternoon, he noticed a thin trail of smoke curling from a distance. He crouched behind a boulder, observing quietly. The smoke suggested a fire, likely a signal or a cooking fire. Confirming that he was near the bandits' camp, he studied the surrounding cliffs and brush, noting possible escape routes, hiding spots, and vantage points. The canyon was familiar terrain in some ways, but the danger made everything sharper, more intense. Henry set up a temporary hiding spot for the night. He fed Willow, gave her water, and wrapped her in a blanket to protect against the cold desert night. Then he sat by the fire he had built, letting the soft crackle warm him. He thought of Naya, of little Aki, and of the courage it took to ask for help. His mind wandered to his past, to days when he had faced storms, lost cattle, and dangerous encounters. He realized that this mission was different. It was urgent, personal, and morally heavy. As darkness fell, the canyon transformed. Shadows stretched long and deep, and the temperature dropped sharply. Henry remained vigilant, knowing that bandits could patrol at any time. He kept his fire small and controlled, ensuring it could not be seen from afar. He thought about the coming day and the steps he would need to take: approach the camp carefully, assess the situation, locate the child, and find a way to rescue him without alerting the bandits. Each thought was a plan, each plan a promise to protect Aki. Sleep was difficult. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, the snap of a twig, kept him alert. Yet there was a quiet satisfaction in being part of something meaningful again. The desert was harsh, the night was long, but he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. He had purpose, a mission, and the chance to do something truly brave. Before dawn, Henry was awake. The first rays of sunlight illuminated the canyon walls, casting long shadows and highlighting the paths he would take. He mounted Willow quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace of the morning. The bandits' fire's smoke was faint but visible, confirming the camp's location. Henry studied the terrain, noting the best approach and the safest cover. His mind was clear, focused, and ready. As he began moving toward the camp, Henry felt a mixture of fear and excitement. He knew this mission could be dangerous, that the bandits were unpredictable, and that one wrong move could have serious consequences. But he also knew he could not turn back. The boy's life depended on him, and the quiet life he had built would have to wait. The mission ahead would test his courage, patience, and skill, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay in the canyon. The morning air was crisp, the desert alive with sounds of life waking. Henry's heart pounded in rhythm with Willow's careful steps. Ahead, the smoke from the bandits' camp wavered in the morning breeze. Every detail mattered: the position of rocks, the shadows of cliffs, the sounds carried by the wind. Henry moved silently, determined and aware of every movement around him. He had come too far to fail now. With the camp finally within sight, Henry slowed Willow and crouched behind a rocky outcrop. He watched the bandits, noting their numbers, movements, and routines. His plan was forming. Patience, observation, and stealth would be his tools. He would need to act carefully, strike at the right moment, and rescue the boy without drawing attention. Every skill he had honed over decades would be tested. Henry knew the journey ahead would be difficult, dangerous, and exhausting. But as he looked toward the camp, he also felt hope. Hope for the boy, hope for Naya, and hope for himself. He had accepted the challenge, and he was ready to face whatever the canyon, the bandits, and fate would throw at him. For the first time in a long time, Henry McAllister felt that life, purpose, and courage could come together in a single moment. The desert held danger, but also opportunity. And Henry was ready to seize it. Henry McAllister crept silently along the narrow ledge of the canyon, his heart beating steadily but his senses sharp. The early morning sun glinted off the rocks, highlighting the uneven terrain and casting long shadows into the deep canyon below. Every step mattered. A misstep could send loose stones tumbling, alerting anyone in the camp to his presence. Willow, his loyal horse, moved with careful precision beside him, ears flicking at the faintest noises. She seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, her calm presence giving Henry confidence. From this vantage point, Henry could see the bandits' camp below. It was tucked into a wide bend of the canyon, partially hidden by rocky outcrops and dry shrubs. A few rough tents were pitched near a small fire, and Henry could make out a handful of figures moving slowly around the camp. They appeared relaxed, unaware of his approach, which gave him a small sense of relief, but he knew better than to underestimate them. Any sudden movement or sound could ruin everything. He crouched low, surveying the area. The camp had a single entrance, guarded by two men who occasionally changed positions. The fire crackled in the center, smoke curling lazily into the sky. Near the edge of the camp, Henry glimpsed a small figure, sitting quietly under a makeshift shelter. His heart leapt. He recognized the boy's bright eyes and small frame. Little Aki was there, seemingly unharmed but tense, aware of the danger surrounding him. Henry's mind raced as he devised a plan. Direct confrontation was out of the question. He needed to be clever, patient, and careful. He scanned the surrounding cliffs and found a narrow trail that led to a boulder-covered ridge overlooking the camp. From there, he could get close without being seen, and he could also create a diversion if necessary. Every detail mattered: timing, distance, and the wind direction that could carry his movements and noises. Moving silently, Henry led Willow along the hidden trail. The terrain was treacherous, jagged rocks cutting into the soles of his boots and thorns snagging at his clothing. Yet he pressed on, each step measured, his mind focused entirely on rescuing the boy. He felt a mix of fear and determination, knowing that the outcome of this journey depended on his skill and patience. As he approached the ridge, he paused to rest and observe the bandits. There were 4 men in total, moving slowly around the camp. They were armed, but Henry noted that their weapons were mostly for intimidation, not for careful defense. He watched them carefully, noting their patterns and the moments when they turned their attention away from the camp. Timing would be everything. Henry took a deep breath, then moved closer, using the cover of rocks and shrubs. Willow followed without hesitation, her steady breathing blending with the sounds of the canyon. Henry felt a surge of courage as he realized that the hardest part, getting within sight of the boy, was behind him. Now he had to figure out how to get Aki safely out of the camp without alerting the bandits. He crouched behind a large boulder, peering into the camp. Aki was still sitting quietly, looking anxious but alert. Henry's heart ached to see him there, but he felt a renewed determination. He could do this. He had faced storms, wild animals, and dangerous men before. Now, he would rely on patience, strategy, and courage. Henry noticed a small stack of firewood near the edge of the camp. He picked up a few stones and tossed them gently toward the stack, making a soft, clattering sound. The bandits looked up, momentarily distracted, and Henry seized the opportunity. He moved closer, staying low and using every shadow to his advantage. Willow followed quietly, stepping carefully over the rocks. As he neared the boy, Henry whispered, It's okay. I'm here to help. Stay calm, and we'll get out of here. Aki's eyes widened, and he nodded, understanding that this stranger was his only hope. Henry knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We need to be very quiet and very careful, he said. Do exactly as I do. The first step was to move Aki to a hidden spot near the ridge where the bandits could not see them. Henry guided the boy gently but firmly, keeping him low and using the shadows for cover. Willow stayed close, her presence providing a steady sense of safety. Henry's heart pounded in his chest as he led the boy along a narrow path, but he remained calm, knowing that panic could ruin everything. Once they reached the ridge, Henry paused to assess the next move. The bandits had noticed something was amiss, but they had not discovered the boy yet. Henry realized that he needed a diversion to draw their attention away from the ridge. He picked up a small branch and tossed it down the canyon, making it snap loudly against the rocks. Two of the bandits ran toward the noise, leaving only 2 men near the camp. Henry knew this was the moment to act. He guided Aki quietly along a hidden trail that led down the canyon, away from the camp. The path was steep and rough, but Henry's experience allowed him to move carefully without slipping. Aki clung to him, trusting every step, and Henry felt a deep sense of responsibility. Every moment mattered. One mistake could put them both in danger. As they moved, Henry kept a watchful eye on the remaining bandits. They were armed and alert, but their attention was divided. Henry used this to his advantage, leading the boy through the rocks and shrubs, staying just out of sight. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that helped conceal their movements. Henry's mind was sharp, calculating every step, every turn, and every risk. Halfway down the canyon, they encountered a small stream. Henry knelt to let Aki drink, and Willow bent her head to lap the water. It was a brief moment of relief, a quiet pause in the tension-filled mission. Henry looked at the boy and said softly, "We're doing well. Almost there. Just a little further and we'll be safe." Aki nodded, his fear slowly replaced by trust and hope. The path grew steeper as they descended further into the canyon. Loose rocks and uneven terrain made every step challenging. But Henry remained focused. He held on to Aki tightly, guiding him carefully. Willow moved steadily, her hooves finding secure footing among the rocks. Henry thought about the courage of the boy and Naya's faith in him, feeling a renewed determination to succeed. As they neared the bottom of the canyon, Henry spotted a narrow opening in the rocks, a hidden path that would lead them safely away from the bandits. He guided Aki toward it, whispering instructions and encouragement. The boy's small hand fit into Henry's, and together they moved silently, each step bringing them closer to safety. Just as they reached the opening, a shout echoed from the camp. One of the bandits had realized something was wrong. Henry froze, listening carefully. The sound of footsteps followed, but they were still some distance away. He led Aki into the narrow path, pressing him close to the rocks. Willow stayed calm, her presence steadying both of them. Henry knew they had only one chance to escape. He moved swiftly but quietly, guiding Aki through the twisting path. The canyon walls rose high around them, providing cover and shelter. The shouts from the bandits grew fainter as they moved farther away. Henry's heart pounded, but he kept his focus, knowing that safety was within reach if they stayed calm. Finally, they emerged from the canyon into an open area. Henry looked around carefully, scanning for any signs of the bandits. None were in sight. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief and knelt beside Aki. "We're safe for now," he said softly. "You did very well. I'm proud of you." Aki's eyes shone with relief and gratitude. He smiled faintly, the tension of fear slowly leaving his small body. Henry took a moment to let the boy rest. They drank water, ate a small portion of food, and tended to minor scratches from the rough terrain. Henry felt a deep sense of satisfaction and pride. The hardest part was behind them, and now the challenge was to get Aki safely back to Naya. But he knew the journey was not yet over. They still had to navigate the desert and avoid any remaining dangers. As the sun climbed higher, Henry mounted Willow with Aki beside him. They began the slow ride back, taking careful routes and avoiding obvious paths. Henry's mind was alert, scanning the terrain for any sign of pursuit. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, knowing that courage, patience, and careful planning had brought them this far. The desert stretched endlessly before them, vast and challenging, but Henry felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced danger, protected a child, and proven to himself that courage and wisdom could overcome fear. The journey was far from over, but with determination, care, and trust, Henry knew they would succeed. For the first time in many years, Henry McAllister felt alive in a way he had forgotten. Every step, every decision, and every risk had brought him closer to fulfilling a promise, to saving a life, and to rediscovering a sense of purpose he thought he had lost. The canyon behind them held danger and uncertainty, but the path ahead carried hope, courage, and the quiet thrill of doing what was right. Henry McAllister guided Willow carefully through the rugged desert terrain, keeping a watchful eye on every ridge and shadow. Little Aki rode close beside him, his small hands gripping Henry's arm for support. The boy's initial fear had faded slightly, replaced by cautious curiosity and a quiet trust in the man who had risked so much to save him. Henry felt a surge of responsibility and protectiveness. Every step mattered, not just for their safety, but for the fragile hope he could bring back to the boy's mother, Naya. The canyon behind them receded into the distance, its jagged cliffs and hidden crevices now a reminder of how close danger had come. Henry knew the bandits could attempt pursuit, so he chose a route through narrow trails and rocky ridges that would slow anyone following. Willow moved with steady grace, her hooves making little sound against the stones, and Henry's keen eyes scanned the horizon constantly. As they moved, Henry kept talking to Aki in a soft, steady voice. "We're almost there," he said. "We just need to stay calm and move carefully." "You're doing very well," the boy nodded, glancing at Henry with wide, trusting eyes. Henry felt a warmth in his chest. This small bond, fragile yet growing, reminded him of the family he had once known and lost. Hours passed as they navigated the desert. The sun climbed higher and the heat became oppressive. Henry paused at a small cluster of bushes to give Aki water and a few pieces of dried bread. He shaded the boy's face with his hand and murmured, "Stay strong, little one. We're safe for now and we'll reach your mother soon." The boy's lips curved into a faint smile, a glimmer of hope shining through the exhaustion in his eyes. Suddenly, a distant shout broke the stillness. Henry froze, listening carefully. The sound echoed across the canyon walls, a warning or a call from the bandits. He quickly scanned the terrain, estimating the distance and direction. They were still some distance away, but the bandits had realized the boy was gone and might attempt to follow. Henry remained calm. Panic would only make things worse. He led Aki off the main trail, using rocky outcroppings and low shrubs for cover. They moved slowly and deliberately, minimizing noise and avoiding open spaces where they could be seen. Henry's experience in the wild proved invaluable. He could read the land, anticipate danger, and guide Aki safely even under the pressure of potential pursuit. As the afternoon wore on, they approached a narrow ravine leading toward a small oasis Henry had discovered years ago. The oasis offered water, shade, and a hidden spot where they could rest safely. Henry guided Willow into the shade of a cluster of trees. letting the horse drink and graze. Aki sat beside a small stream, splashing water on his face and laughing quietly, a rare sound that warmed Henry's heart. While Aki rested, Henry scanned the horizon. There were no signs of immediate danger, but he knew better than to assume safety. The bandits could appear at any moment, driven by greed or anger. Henry's mind began to form a plan for the final leg of the journey, returning Aki safely to Naya. He needed to move efficiently, using hidden trails and avoiding predictable paths, to ensure they would not be followed. As they prepared to leave the oasis, Henry noticed signs that the bandits had indeed tracked them. Broken branches, footprints near the edge of the ravine, and disturbed sand along the trail. Henry's pulse quickened, but he remained composed. He whispered to Aki, "We need to move quickly and quietly. Stay close to me and follow every step." The boy nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. Henry led them along a narrow, winding trail that climbed steadily toward higher ground. From this vantage point, he could see the distant hills where Naya lived, a faint speck of settlement against the endless desert. The thought of reuniting mother and child gave him renewed energy and focus. Every careful step brought them closer to safety, closer to fulfilling the promise he had made. As they crested a small ridge, Henry paused to survey the area. 2 bandits had appeared on the lower trail, scanning the land for any sign of the missing boy. Henry knew they had only seconds to act. He whispered instructions to Aki and guided him toward a hidden cluster of rocks that provided perfect cover. Willow followed silently, her presence steadying both men. Henry assessed the situation carefully. The bandits below were distracted, speaking to each other in low tones, unaware that their quarry was only yards above them. Henry picked up a small stone and tossed it gently toward a distant bush, creating a soft noise that drew their attention away from the ridge. One of the bandits ran toward the sound, leaving only a single figure on the trail. This was their chance. Henry led Aki down a narrow path hidden by brush, keeping low and moving quickly but carefully. They descended toward a natural tunnel in the rocks, a path Henry had discovered years before that led safely around the canyon. The boy followed, silent and obedient, trusting Henry completely. Once inside the tunnel, they slowed, allowing their breathing to return to normal. Henry knelt beside Aki, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing wonderfully," he said softly. "We're almost there. Just a little further, and you'll be safe with your mother." The boy's eyes shone with gratitude, and for a moment, the weight of fear lifted completely. Exiting the tunnel, Henry guided them through the final stretch of desert, using the uneven terrain for cover. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows and painting the desert in hues of gold and purple. Henry kept moving, knowing that darkness would give them additional protection, but also requiring careful attention to avoid accidents. Finally, the familiar outline of Naya's home appeared in the distance. Henry's heart lifted at the sight. He had promised a reunion, and now it was within reach. He whispered to Aki, "Look, we're almost home. Stay close to me." The boy's small hand tightened around Henry's, and together they rode the last few steps across the open desert. Naya appeared at the edge of the yard, her eyes scanning the horizon anxiously. When she saw her son, her face broke into a mixture of relief and joy. She ran toward them, calling Aki's name, and the boy broke into a run, throwing himself into his mother's arms. Henry watched quietly, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The reunion was everything he had hoped for, pure, heartfelt, and deeply moving. Naya turned to Henry, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've brought him back to me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Henry shook his head, smiling gently. "Seeing him safe is thanks enough," he said. "That's all that matters." The three of them stood together, the sun setting behind the distant mesas, casting long shadows and bathing the desert in warm light. For Henry, this moment was a reminder of the value of courage, patience, and determination. He had faced danger, protected a child, and kept a promise, and in doing so, he had found a sense of purpose and fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. As night fell, Henry stayed with Naya and Aki, making sure they were settled and safe. The boys' fear had faded completely, replaced by laughter and stories of the brief adventure he had survived. Naya and Henry shared quiet conversation, discussing the events of the day and the relief of being together again. Henry felt a deep respect for her strength, courage, and unwavering love for her son. That night, as Henry lay under the stars on a simple bed he had made in the guest room, he reflected on the day's events. The desert had tested him, the bandits had challenged him, and the boy's life had depended on his skill and courage. And yet, through it all, he had persevered. He realized that true bravery was not just in facing danger, but in protecting others, acting with wisdom, and following through on promises. Henry McAllister closed his eyes, feeling a quiet peace. The boy was safe, the mother was grateful, and the desert was once again silent. For the first time in many years, he felt a connection, not just to the land, but to people and purpose. He had faced fear and emerged with something far greater: trust, gratitude, and the knowledge that even in a quiet life, courage and compassion could shine brightly. Henry McAllister awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the small window of Naya's home. The air was cool and quiet, carrying the faint scent of the desert and the nearby herbs that Naya had planted around her yard. He stretched, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles used after days of travel and careful effort. Aki was already awake, quietly playing with a small collection of stones and twigs he had gathered the day before. The boy's laughter, soft and bright, drifted through the room, and Henry felt a warmth in his chest he had not experienced in many years. Naya appeared at the doorway, her expression gentle but firm. "Henry," she said, "thank you again for everything you did. I cannot put into words what it means to have my son back safely. You risked your life for us." Henry shook his head, offering a modest smile. "It was nothing more than what any decent person would do," he said. "A child's safety is always worth the risk." She studied him for a moment, as if searching for the truth behind his calm words. "You have a courage that is rare," she said softly, "and a heart that is even rarer." Henry felt a flicker of emotion, unfamiliar in its intensity, stirring in his chest. He realized that over the years he had grown accustomed to solitude, but now, in this quiet home and surrounded by a grateful mother and her child, he felt the stirrings of something he had thought lost: connection. Breakfast was simple but hearty: fresh eggs, flatbread, and a small pot of coffee that Henry found pleasantly strong. Aki insisted on helping set the table, careful to arrange each item perfectly. Henry watched with amusement and quiet admiration. The boy's innocence and resilience were striking. Despite the danger he had faced, Aki's spirit remained unbroken. Henry felt a sense of pride, not for himself, but for the courage and determination the child had shown. After breakfast, Naya asked Henry to sit with her while she shared more about her life. She told him of the challenges she faced raising Aki alone after the loss of her husband. Her voice was steady, but her eyes sometimes glistened with unshed tears. Henry listened quietly, understanding the weight she carried. Her strength and perseverance impressed him deeply. He realized that courage came in many forms, not only in facing danger, but in living each day with hope and dignity despite hardship. The days that followed were filled with quiet work and shared effort. Henry helped repair sections of fencing around Naya's property and mend a few broken tools. Aki enjoyed sitting nearby, watching intently and occasionally asking questions about how things worked. Henry found himself explaining, demonstrating, and teaching, and he felt a satisfaction he had not known since his own children were young. The simple acts of labor, observation, and guidance created a bond that was both comforting and meaningful. Naya, too, became more than just a host. She shared stories of her culture, her people, and the traditions she held dear. She taught Henry small tasks: how to identify plants useful for medicine, how to prepare simple meals with limited resources, and the importance of observing nature carefully. Henry absorbed these lessons with genuine interest, realizing that even in his long life of experience, there was much to learn. The connection between them grew, grounded not in promises or rewards, but in respect, gratitude, and mutual reliance. One afternoon, Henry and Aki went to the nearby stream to fetch water and examine the surrounding land for safe routes, should danger approach again. The boy walked close to Henry, speaking freely about his dreams, his favorite animals, and the stories his mother had told him at bedtime. Henry listened, occasionally offering his own tales of the desert, his youth, and the lessons he had learned. Their conversations were simple but rich with meaning, weaving trust and companionship into the fabric of their days. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Naya and Henry sat together on the porch, watching Aki chase a small lizard across the dusty yard. The sight brought a quiet joy to Henry's heart. He had spent so many years alone, yet now he found himself part of a small, fragile family, their lives intertwined by courage, loyalty, and care. The thought was both humbling and exhilarating. Naya turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Henry," she said, "you have done more for us than words can express. Not only did you save my son, but you brought hope back into our lives." Henry smiled quietly, a mixture of humility and quiet pride. "It was not a task I could refuse," he said, "and I have learned much from you both. Courage and love take many forms, and I see them clearly now." The days passed, each one blending work, learning, and quiet moments of reflection. Henry taught Aki how to ride safely, care for animals, and observe the land for signs of danger. He shared stories of the old days on the ranch, of cattle drives and storms, of triumphs and mistakes, imparting lessons that were practical, moral, and sometimes humorous. Aki listened eagerly, absorbing every detail, laughing at the moments that were meant to amuse, and asking questions that challenged Henry to think in new ways. Evenings were spent around the fire. Naya would sit nearby, occasionally knitting or preparing simple meals, while Henry recounted tales of the desert, past adventures, and encounters with wild animals. Aki's questions were sharp and insightful, reflecting the child's intelligence and curiosity. Henry found joy not only in teaching but in seeing the boy's mind grow, understanding the world and gaining confidence in himself. The bond between them deepened, a mixture of guidance, protection, and mutual respect. One morning, while checking the perimeter of the property, Henry noticed signs of wildlife near the edge of the land, tracks of deer, coyote, and other desert creatures. He explained to Aki how to identify each, teaching him the importance of observation and patience. The boy's eyes sparkled with fascination, and Henry felt the pride of a mentor who had passed knowledge to a capable, eager learner. Naya watched them from the porch, her expression one of quiet gratitude and relief, knowing that her son's safety was now ensured and that Henry's guidance would continue to protect him. As the weeks passed, Henry realized that his life had transformed in subtle but profound ways. The quiet solitude he had once treasured was replaced with a sense of belonging, responsibility, and emotional richness he had not felt for years. Naya's unwavering strength and the boy's innocent courage had awakened something in him, a recognition that life's greatest rewards were not measured in gold or possessions, but in love, trust, and the bonds formed through acts of bravery and kindness. One evening, under a sky filled with stars, Henry, Naya, and Aki sat together outside. The desert was quiet, the only sounds the soft rustling of grasses and the occasional call of a distant owl. Henry reflected on the journey that had brought them together, the danger, the uncertainty, and the courage it had taken to navigate both the land and the human heart. He realized that true fulfillment came not from isolation or comfort, but from connection, empathy, and shared experiences. Naya reached over, placing a hand on Henry's arm. "You've given us something far greater than life itself," she said softly. "You've given hope, safety, and a future." Henry looked at her, humbled and grateful, feeling the depth of her words. He realized that their bond was not based on obligation or reward, but on mutual respect, trust, and the shared experience of facing fear and emerging stronger. Aki, tired but content, leaned against Henry, his small body warm and reassuring. Henry felt a deep sense of completion. He had faced danger, overcome fear, and kept a promise that mattered more than anything else in his life. The boy's trust and the mother's gratitude were treasures that far outweighed any physical reward. In that quiet moment, beneath the stars and surrounded by the desert he had long loved, Henry understood the true meaning of purpose, courage, and human connection. The days continued with routine, but a new energy had entered Henry's life. He helped Naya maintain her small farm, guided Aki in learning and play, and spent quiet evenings reflecting on the lessons of the past. He realized that though the rescue had begun as a mission, it had transformed into a life-changing journey of the heart. Bonds had formed, trust had been earned, and a new family had emerged, not defined by circumstance but by love, respect, and shared courage. Eventually, the time came for Henry to consider returning to his own home, but the thought of leaving was no longer appealing. He realized that his place was here, among people who had come to mean more to him than solitude ever had. The quiet life he had once cherished had given him survival skills and experience, but this life, this small family, this connection offered fulfillment, joy, and purpose. Henry McAllister had come to save a boy, but in doing so, he had saved himself as well, from loneliness, from the emptiness of routine, and from the belief that life's adventures were behind him. In their little home on the edge of the desert, Henry, Naya, and Aki had created a bond that would endure. Courage, trust, and love had brought them together, and in the quiet beauty of the desert, they found not just safety, but home. And as the sun set over the distant mesas, painting the sky in colors of hope and renewal, Henry knew that life, even after years of solitude, could surprise him with its capacity for connection, redemption, and happiness. The journey had ended, but a new chapter had begun, one filled with warmth, laughter, and the knowledge that courage and compassion, when paired with love and trust, could change lives forever.